The ship was bigger than any building on Earth. It hung in the sky above Seoul like a second moon, blocking the sun and casting a shadow over 3 million people. Commander Yuna stood on the roof of the Defense Ministry, looking up at it with her hands behind her back. The wind pulled at her uniform, but she did not move. "They want to talk," said Lieutenant Taeho, walking up beside her. He was holding a tablet, and his face was pale. "They sent a message. They know our language. They know everything about us." Yuna did not look at him. "How long have they been watching?" 300 years. Maybe longer. She finally turned. Taeho was young, barely 30, but he looked older now. Fear did that to people. She had seen it before. "Show me," she said. They walked inside, down long hallways filled with soldiers and scientists running in every direction. The world had changed in 1 hour. Everything humans believed about being alone in the universe was now wrong. Yuna had trained for war her whole life, but not this kind. Not against something from the stars. The conference room was full of generals and politicians. They all looked at Yuna when she entered. She was the youngest commander in the Defense Corps, but she had earned her rank. She had fought in 3 wars and never lost a battle. Now she faced something no human had ever faced before. "Play the message," she said. The screen on the wall turned on. An alien appeared. It was tall and thin, with skin like silver metal and eyes that were completely black. It had no mouth that Yuna could see, but somehow it spoke. "We are the Helix Collective," it said. "We have watched your species for 300 of your years. We have studied you. We have measured you. We know what you are." The alien raised one long arm, and images appeared on the screen. Charts, graphs, numbers. Yuna recognized some of them. Heart rate, blood pressure, brain activity. But there were others she did not understand. "We have recorded every limit of your species," the alien continued. "Your bodies fail at temperatures below -20 degrees. Your minds break after 72 hours without sleep. Your hearts stop when blood loss reaches 40%. Your lungs cannot function when oxygen falls below 14%. Taeho leaned close to Yuna. "They know everything. How much pain we can take. How much stress. When we give up. When we die." The alien on the screen tilted its head. "We have cataloged 6,000 species across 12 galaxies. Every species has limits. Every species can be predicted. Every species can be controlled." Its black eyes seemed to look directly at Yuna. "You are no different. We know exactly what you can do. And we know exactly what you cannot do." The screen went dark. The room was silent. Yuna looked at the faces around her. She saw fear. She saw confusion. She saw people who had spent their lives believing they were the top of the food chain, now learning they were just another animal in someone else's zoo. "When did they want to meet?" she asked. General Park, the oldest man in the room, cleared his throat. "Tomorrow. They want to discuss integration." "Integration?" "Joining their collective. They say it is not optional." Yuna nodded slowly. She thought about the numbers on the screen. The limits. The predictions. The aliens had studied humanity like scientists studying insects. They believed they knew everything. But Yuna had grown up in a small village in the mountains. She had watched her grandmother carry water from a well every day until she was 90 years old. She had seen her father work in the fields with a broken arm because the harvest could not wait. She had held her mother's hand when she died, and her mother had smiled until the very end. The aliens had measured human bodies. But Yuna wondered if they had measured human hearts. The next day, Yuna stood in the meeting hall with Taeho at her side. The alien delegation entered through a door that seemed to appear from nowhere. There were 5 of them, all different shapes and sizes. The leader was the same serpent-like creature from the video, wrapped in claws that shimmered like water. "I am Ambassador Krell," it said. "I speak for the Helix Collective. I am Commander Yuna. I speak for Earth." Krell's many eyes moved across her face. "You are small. Your species is small. But you have spread across your planet like insects. You breed quickly. You adapt quickly. This makes you useful. Useful for what? Labor. Your bodies are weak, but they are easy to replace. Your minds are simple, but they can follow instructions. The collective has use for such species." Taiho's hand moved toward his weapon. Yuna stopped him with a look. "You said you studied us," she said calmly. "You said you know our limits. The index does not lie. We know what you are capable of and what you are not." Yuna stepped forward. She was not a tall woman, but she stood like a mountain. "You watched us from space. You measured us in your laboratories. You put numbers on everything we do." She paused. "But you have never fought us." Krell made a sound that might have been laughter. "We do not need to fight you. We know exactly how much force is required to break your species. Precisely how much pain before you surrender. Exactly how much fear before you collapse." Its eyes glittered. "Your resistance would last 17 days. Then you would submit. This is what the index predicts. The index is wrong." The room went cold. The other aliens shifted, their bodies making sounds like breaking glass. Krell leaned forward, its silver face inches from Yuna's. "The index has never been wrong." Yuna smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. "Then I suppose you know exactly what to expect from us." She turned and walked toward the door. Taiho followed, his heart pounding in his chest. Behind them, Krell watched with eyes that had seen 1,000 species rise and fall. "Commander," Taiho whispered when they were outside, "what are we going to do? They know everything about us. Every weakness. Every limit." Yuna looked up at the massive ship still hanging in the sky. Somewhere up there, aliens were looking at charts and graphs and numbers, believing they understood humanity. "They know our limits," she said quietly. "But they do not know what we do when we reach them." Taiho frowned. "What do you mean?" Yuna thought about her grandmother carrying water, her father working with a broken arm, her mother smiling at the end. She thought about every human who had ever been told they could not do something and did it anyway. "Other species stop when they reach their limits," she said. "Humans just get started." She began walking toward the Defense Ministry. There was work to do, plans to make, a war to prepare for. The Helix Collective believed they knew everything about humanity. They had spent 300 years watching, measuring, cataloging. They had built an index that predicted exactly how humans would break. But they had made one mistake. They had studied humans when they were comfortable, when they were safe, when they had nothing to fight for. They had never seen what humans became when everything they loved was at stake. And Yuno was going to show them. Station Halo was humanity's first home in space. It floated between Earth and Mars, a spinning ring of metal and glass where 3,000 people lived and worked. Dr. Jisoo had been there for 2 years, running the medical center and dreaming of the stars. She was eating lunch when the attack came. The lights went red. Alarms screamed through the halls. Jisoo dropped her food and ran toward the medical bay, her white coat flying behind her. Around her, people were screaming, running, falling. The station shook like it was being torn apart. She never made it to the medical bay. The explosion threw her into a wall. She felt her leg break, heard the bone snap like a dry branch. Pain shot through her body so strong that she could not breathe. For a moment, everything went black. When she opened her eyes, the hallway was filled with smoke. The temperature was dropping fast. She could see her breath in the air, little clouds of white that disappeared into the darkness. "Help!" someone whispered nearby. "Please help." Jisoo turned her head. 2 crew members lay on the floor, both unconscious. One was bleeding from his head. The other was barely breathing. They were young, maybe 20 years old. Children, really. Children who had come to space looking for adventure. The station's computer spoke in a calm voice. Oxygen levels at 15% and falling. Temperature at -10 degrees. All personnel evacuate to emergency pods. Jisoo tried to stand. Her broken leg screamed at her, and she fell back down. The pain was so bad that tears ran down her face. According to everything she knew as a doctor, she should not be able to move. A broken femur meant shock. Shock meant shutdown. Her body should be giving up. But those 2 children needed her. She grabbed a metal pipe from the wreckage and used it to push herself up. Every movement was agony. Every breath was fire. She did not stop. She crawled to the first crew member and checked his pulse. Weak, but alive. She crawled to the second. Also alive. The computer spoke again. Oxygen levels at 14%. Cognitive function will cease in approximately 8 minutes. Jisoo looked at the 2 bodies. Then she looked at the maintenance tunnel across the hall. The emergency pods were on the other side of the station. Too far to walk. But the tunnels might get her there faster. She grabbed the first crew member and pulled him onto her back. He was heavy, maybe 80 kilograms. With her broken leg, she should not be able to carry him at all. The index would say it was impossible. Her body would say it was impossible. Jisoo did not care what was impossible. She grabbed the second crew member under her arm and started crawling toward the tunnel. In the command center, Captain Del-hyun was fighting a different battle. The collective ships surrounded Station Halo like wolves around a wounded deer. They had not fired to destroy. They had fired to wound. To test. To see if the index was right about human limits. Del-hyun stood at his console with a plasma burn across his chest. The wound was deep. He could see his own ribs through the blackened flesh. The pain was beyond anything he had ever felt, like someone had poured fire into his body and left it there to burn. The ship's doctor had told him to lie down, to let someone else take command, to accept that he was dying. Do-hyun had refused. "Status report," he said, his voice steady despite the agony. Ensign Minji looked up from her console. Her left hand was wrapped in bloody cloth. She had lost 3 fingers to frostbite when the heating system failed. The cold had turned them black, and she had cut them off herself so she could keep working. "Weapons at 30%, she said. "Shields gone. Hull breaches on decks 4, 7, and 12. Oxygen at 12% and falling. How long until the collective boards us?" 20 minutes. Maybe less. Do-hyun nodded. According to the index, he should be dead. Minji should be in shock. The entire crew should be unconscious from lack of oxygen. The collective had designed this attack perfectly. They had reduced everything to exactly the levels that the index said would break humans. But the humans were not breaking. "Open a channel to the enemy fleet," Do-hyun said. Minji's remaining fingers flew across the console. A moment later, an alien face appeared on the screen. It was one of the collective's commanders, a creature with 4 arms and skin like blue stone. "You are still alive," the commander said. It sounded surprised. "The index predicted your crew would be unconscious by now." Do-hyun smiled. Blood ran from the corner of his mouth. "Your index is broken. That is impossible. The index has never failed. First time for everything." The commander tilted its head. "You are injured. Badly injured. Your wound would be fatal to 97% of species in the collective. Why do you continue?" Do-hyun thought about his daughter back on Earth. She was 7 years old. She had his eyes and her mother's smile. The last time he saw her, she had made him promise to come home. "Because I have someone waiting for me," he said. He closed the channel and turned to Minji. "How much ammunition do we have left?" 40 seconds of continuous fire. "Then we have 40 seconds to win. Target their command ship." "Everything we have." Minji did not hesitate. Her 7 remaining fingers moved across the console like they had 10,000 times before. Outside, Station Halo's weapons came to life, pouring fire into the collective's fleet. In the maintenance tunnel, Jisoo kept crawling. She had been moving for 20 minutes. The index said she should have collapsed after 5. Her broken leg dragged behind her, useless and screaming. The 2 crew members weighed her down like stones. The oxygen was so thin that every breath felt like breathing through a straw. She did not stop. She thought about her patients, the people who had trusted her to save them, the families waiting on Earth for news. She thought about the young man on her back, who had shown her pictures of his girlfriend just last week, the young woman under her arm, who had told her about her dream of seeing Saturn. They had lives waiting for them, futures waiting for them, love waiting for them. Jisoo would not let them die in a cold tunnel. She reached the emergency pods just as her vision started to go black. Her arms shook. Her lungs burned. Her heart was beating so hard, she could hear it in her ears. She loaded the 2 crew members into a pod and strapped them in. Then she pulled herself inside and hit the launch button. The pod shot away from Station Halo just as the collective's command ship exploded in a ball of fire. Do-hyun had done it. 40 seconds of ammunition, and he had hit the enemy's heart. In her pod, Jisoo finally let herself collapse. She had been conscious for 31 minutes with oxygen levels that should have knocked her out in 8. She had carried 150 kilograms on a broken leg. She had done what the index said was impossible. As darkness took her, she smiled. Because she knew something the collective did not. Humans did not care about limits. They cared about each other. And for the people they loved, they would break every limit the universe could create. The collective's commander watched the battle from his remaining ships. His command vessel was destroyed. Half his fleet was damaged. And the humans on Station Halo were still fighting, still moving, still alive. He looked at the index on his screen. The numbers had not changed. The predictions were clear. The humans should have failed, but they had not. For the first time in 10,000 years, the commander felt something he had never felt before: fear. The High Council of the Helix Collective had not met in emergency session for 500 years. The last time was when a species called the Varath had developed weapons that could destroy stars. The collective had crushed them in 3 days. Now they met again, and they met because of humans. High Chancellor Vex sat at the center of the Great Chamber, surrounded by representatives from 1,000 worlds. His body was ancient, covered in scales that had seen the rise and fall of empires. His eyes had watched species born and species die. He had never been surprised by anything. Until now. "Play the recordings," he commanded. The chamber filled with images from Station Halo. Humans fighting with wounds that should have killed them. Humans thinking clearly with oxygen levels that should have destroyed their brains. Humans moving, running, shooting, surviving beyond every prediction the index had made. "This is impossible," said one of the council members, a creature made of living crystal. "The index is perfect. It has never failed." "It has failed now," Vex replied. His voice was cold. "Perhaps the data was corrupted. Perhaps we measured them wrong. We measured them for 300 years. We tested every variable. We accounted for every factor." Vex turned to face the council. "The data is not wrong. The humans are wrong. The chamber went silent. On the diplomatic channel, Admiral Hyan of the Earth Defense Fleet waited patiently. He was an old soldier, 63 years old, with gray hair and a face full of scars. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship was chaos. Officers shouted orders. Screens flashed with battle data. Somewhere in the distance, ships were dying. But Hyan was calm. Beside him stood his tactical officer, Sujin. She was 32, small and quiet, with eyes that missed nothing. Right now, she was treating a stab wound in her side, while simultaneously running calculations for the next battle. A piece of metal had gone through her during the last attack. She had pulled it out herself and kept working. "Admiral," one of his officers called out. "The collective is accepting our communication request. Put them through." Vex's face appeared on the screen. For a long moment, the two leaders simply looked at each other. Human and alien. Predator and prey, though it was no longer clear which was which. "Your species continues to surprise us," Vex said finally. "You sound disappointed." "I am confused. The Index predicted your defeat. It predicted exactly how your people would fail, how they would break, how they would surrender. Instead, they exceeded every limit we recorded. They survived conditions that should have been fatal. They fought with injuries that should have been crippling." Vex leaned forward. "How?" Hyan smiled slightly. "You measured us in laboratories, in controlled environments, under clinical conditions. Yes, that is how all species are measured. Then you measured the wrong thing." Sujin looked up from her wound, her needle still in her hand. "You measured a human lifting weights in a gym," she said. "You did not measure a mother lifting a crashed vehicle off her child. You measured how long a human could stay awake in a comfortable room. You did not measure a father staying awake for 6 days to guard his sick daughter. You measured stress responses in simulation. You did not measure what happens when someone we love is about to die." Vex stared at her. "These are the same biological systems. The muscles are the same. The brain chemistry is the same. The body is the same," Hyan agreed. "But the heart is different." "Heart? Your heart is a pump. We have measured it extensively. It fails after, not that heart." Hyan placed his hand on his chest. "This heart, the part of us that loves, the part that refuses to give up, the part that would rather die than let someone we care about suffer." He shook his head. "You cannot measure that in a laboratory. You can only see it when everything is on the line." The council chamber erupted in noise. Aliens argued with each other, their voices mixing into a wall of sound that meant nothing to Vex. He sat still, his ancient eyes fixed on the human admiral. Across the war, the pattern repeated itself. Pilot Junho had been flying his fighter for 18 hours. The Index said humans lost cognitive function after 6 hours of continuous combat stress. Junho had passed that limit 12 hours ago. His hands shook, his vision blurred, his muscles screamed for rest. But his squadron was pinned down behind enemy lines. 20 pilots, some of them his friends since the academy. If he stopped flying, they would die. So he kept flying. When his weapons ran out, he crashed his fighter into the hangar bay of an enemy carrier. He climbed out of the wreckage with a broken arm and 2 cracked ribs. He picked up a metal bar from the debris and started fighting on foot. The collective soldiers who faced him were confused. According to the Index, this human should be unconscious, should be dead, should be anything but standing in their hangar with fire in his eyes and a weapon in his hand. Junho did not care what the Index said. He only cared about his friends. Engineer Yoonji was working on Deck 7 when the hull breach happened. The explosion tore a hole in the wall 2 meters wide. Air rushed out into space, pulling everything with it. Yoonji grabbed a support beam and held on as her tools, her equipment, and one of her colleagues flew past her into the void. She could see the stars through the hole. They were beautiful. They were also deadly. The emergency system was trying to seal the breach, but it was damaged. It would take at least 4 minutes to close. The rest of her team was on the other side of the deck, trapped in a compartment with limited air. If the breach was not sealed, they would all die. Yoonji looked at the hole. Then she looked at the emergency foam dispenser on the wall. Then she made a decision. She let go of the beam and jumped toward the breach. The vacuum of space hit her like a hammer. The air rushed out of her lungs. Her blood began to boil. Her skin froze. The index said humans could survive in vacuum for 90 seconds at most. After that, death was certain. Yoonji did not plan to be in vacuum for 90 seconds. She grabbed the edges of the breach and pulled her body across the opening. Her flesh sealed the gap, blocking the air from escaping. She could feel her body dying, cell by cell, second by second. The pain was beyond anything she had ever imagined. She held on. The emergency system activated. Foam sprayed around her, filling the gaps, creating a seal. After 4.5 minutes longer than the index said she could survive, Yoonji fell back into the ship. Her team found her unconscious but alive. Her skin was covered in burns from the cold. Her eyes were bleeding. Her lungs had collapsed. But she was breathing, and her team was safe. High Chancellor Vex watched the reports come in. Story after story of humans exceeding their limits. Surviving the unsurvivable. Fighting the unfightable. Winning the unwinnable. The index is useless, he said quietly. The council fell silent. We have built our entire civilization on the index. We have conquered 6,000 species because we knew their limits. We knew exactly how much force was required to break them, control them, use them. He looked at the recordings of humans still playing on the screens. But these creatures do not obey their limits. They treat them as suggestions. Then what do we do? Asked the crystal creature. Vex was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. We adapt. Or we lose. It was the first time in 500 years that the Helix Collective had admitted the possibility of defeat. And somewhere across the void, humans kept fighting, kept surviving, kept breaking every limit the universe tried to place on them. Because that was what humans did. That was what they had always done. And that was what they would always do. 3 years. The war had lasted 3 years. The Helix Collective had conquered entire galaxies in less time. They had broken species that numbered in the trillions. They had crushed civilizations that had existed for millions of years. Their methods were perfect. Their index was infallible. Their victory was always certain. Until they met humanity. General Sunwoo stood in the ruins of what had been Seoul's Memorial District. The buildings around her were destroyed. The streets were filled with rubble. The sky was gray with smoke that never seemed to clear. She had been born in this city 54 years ago. She had played in these streets as a child. Now she watched her soldiers dig through the wreckage, searching for survivors. General, said Corporal Ji-won, running up beside her. He was young, 23, with a fresh scar across his face from a battle 2 weeks ago. We found 12 more survivors in the subway tunnels. 3 of them are children. Sunwoo nodded. Get them to the medical station. Make sure they have food and water. Yes, General. Ji-won hesitated. There's something else. What? The collective is requesting communication. They want to talk about terms. Sunwoo turned to face him. Her eyes were hard, but there was something else there too. Something that might have been hope. What kind of terms? They didn't say, but they used the word withdrawal. For the first time in 3 years, Sunwoo allowed herself to smile. It was a small smile, tired and worn. But it was real. Tell them I'll speak with them in 1 hour. I need to finish here first. She turned back to the ruins. Her soldiers were pulling a woman from the rubble. The woman was crying, holding a baby in her arms. Both of them were covered in dust and blood, but both of them were alive. Sunwoo walked over and knelt beside them. "You're safe now," she said gently. "We've got you." The woman looked up at her with eyes full of tears. "I thought we were going to die. I thought nobody would come." "We always come," Sunwoo said. "That's what we do." She helped the woman stand, then handed her off to a medic. For a moment, she watched them walk away. The baby was crying, loud and strong. The sound of life in the middle of death. That was why they fought. Not for territory. Not for resources. Not for pride or glory or conquest. They fought for the crying babies. For the mothers holding them. For the families trying to survive. For every human being who deserved a chance to live. 1 hour later, Sunwoo stood in a temporary command center, facing a screen that showed High Chancellor Vex. The alien looked different than he had 3 years ago. Older, somehow, tired. "General Sunwoo," Vex said, "I am told you are the commander of Earth Defense. I am. Then I will speak plainly. The Helix Collective wishes to end this war." Sunwoo kept her face neutral, but her heart was pounding. "I'm listening. We offer unconditional withdrawal from all human territories. We will remove our forces completely. We will destroy all index entries related to your species. We will never return. And what do you want in exchange?" Vex was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, quieter, almost humble. "We want to understand." "Understand what?" "How you did it. How you broke every prediction we made. How you exceeded every limit we recorded. How you won." Sunwoo thought about the last 3 years. The battles. The deaths. The moments when all seemed lost. She thought about the soldiers who had fought with wounds that should have killed them. The doctors who had worked without sleep for days. The engineers who had rebuilt destroyed ships while enemy fire rained down around them. She thought about all the ways humans had broken their limits. "You want to know our secret," she said. "Yes, it's not a secret. It's who we are." Vex leaned forward. "Explain." Sunwoo looked at him for a long moment. Then she began to speak. 3 years ago, you came to our world with your index. You had studied us for 300 years. You knew exactly how strong we were, how fast we could run, how long we could stay awake, how much pain we could endure. You had numbers for everything. And you were right. All of your numbers were right. Vex nodded slowly. Then how did you exceed them? Because you measured the wrong thing. Sunwoo stepped closer to the screen. You measured human bodies. You measured muscles and bones and blood. You measured brain chemistry and hormone levels and nerve responses. But you never measured what really makes us human. And what is that? Love. The word hung in the air between them. Vex stared at her with his ancient eyes, uncomprehending. Love, Sunwoo repeated. You measured a soldier's physical limits, but you did not measure how far he would go to protect his family. You measured a mother's strength, but you did not measure what she would do to save her child. You measured our breaking points, but you did not understand that when someone we love is in danger, those breaking points disappear. She thought about all the stories she had heard during the war. The pilot who flew for 18 hours. The engineer who survived 4 minutes in vacuum. The doctor who crawled through tunnels with a broken leg. None of them had done those things for themselves. They had done them for each other. Your index treats limits as walls, Sunwoo continued. Absolute barriers that cannot be crossed. But humans do not see limits that way. We see them as challenges, as obstacles to overcome, And when the people we love are on the other side of those limits, we will do whatever it takes to reach them." Vex was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "We have cataloged 6,000 species. We have studied them all. We have conquered them all. Not one of them ever exceeded their documented limits." He looked at Sunwoo with something that might have been respect. "You are the first. We will not be the last." "What do you mean?" Sunwoo smiled. "You have spent 10,000 years telling species what they cannot do. You have shown them their limits and taught them to accept them. But now they have seen what humans did. They have seen that limits can be broken. They have seen that the index is not infallible." Her smile widened. "How long do you think it will be before other species start to wonder what they might be capable of?" Vex did not answer. He did not need to. They both knew the truth. The Helix Collective had built an empire on the belief that every species had unbreakable limits. Humans had proven that belief wrong. And once that proof was out in the universe, it could never be taken back. The galaxy would never be the same. "We will send a formal surrender document within the hour," Vex said finally. "The collective will leave human space within 30 days. And the index will be destroyed. All entries, all data, all predictions." Vex paused. "You have taught us that some things cannot be measured." He ended the communication. The screen went dark. Sunwoo stood alone in the command center, looking at her reflection in the blank screen. She was tired. So tired. 3 years of war had worn her down to the bone. But they had won. Not because they were stronger. Not because they were smarter. But because they loved each other enough to become something more than what they were. She walked outside into the ruins of Seoul and looked up at the sky. Somewhere up there, the collective ships were preparing to leave. Somewhere up there, a new chapter was beginning for humanity and for the galaxy. And somewhere deep inside her, Sunwoo felt something she had not felt in 3 years. Peace. 5 years had passed since the war ended. The Helix Collective had kept their promise. Their ships had left human space. Their soldiers had returned home. The index entries on humanity had been destroyed. But the story of what happened had spread across the galaxy like fire. Ambassador Yuna stood in the great chamber of the Galactic Council, looking out at a sea of alien faces. There were thousands of them, representatives from species she had never seen before. Some were tall and thin. Some were small and round. Some did not even have bodies. Just floating clouds of light that hummed with intelligence. All of them had come to hear humanity speak. Yuna was older now, 52 years old, with gray in her black hair and new lines on her face. But she still stood like a mountain. She still had the same fire in her eyes that she had shown Ambassador Krell all those years ago. Behind her stood a delegation of humans. She recognized them all. Dr. Jisoo, the woman who had crawled through tunnels with a broken leg, carrying 2 people on her back. Her leg had never fully healed. She walked with a limp now, but she was still saving lives, running the largest hospital on Mars. Captain Do-yoon, the man who had commanded Station Halo with a wound that should have killed him. He had retired from the military, but the scar on his chest was still visible through his formal uniform. He had become a teacher, training the next generation of officers. Ensign Minji, who had lost 3 fingers to frostbite and kept fighting anyway. She had received artificial replacements, but she rarely used them. She said the missing fingers reminded her of what she had survived. They had all come here today to answer a question that the galaxy had been asking for 5 years. How had humanity done the impossible? "Thank you for inviting us," Yuna said, her voice clear and strong. "I know many of you have traveled far to be here. I know many of you have questions." A creature made of blue fire spoke first. We have studied the records of your war with the Helix Collective. We have seen the data. Your species exceeded documented biological limits by an average of 200%. Some individuals exceeded their limits by more than 400%. The fire flickered. This should not be possible. I know, Una replied. Then explain. Una looked back at her delegation. Then she turned to face the council again. Your index measured our bodies, she said. It measured how far we could run before our legs gave out. How long we could stay awake before our minds failed. How much pain we could endure before we surrendered. And all of those measurements were correct. In normal circumstances, we would fail at exactly the points the index predicted. She paused. But the index never measured us in abnormal circumstances. It never measured what happens when a human is fighting for something more important than themselves. A serpentine creature raised its head. What could be more important than survival? Lots of things. Una smiled slightly. Love, family, friends, hope, the belief that the universe can be better than it is, the determination to make it so. Dr. Jisoo stepped forward. Her voice was softer than Una's, but the chamber fell silent to listen. When I was crawling through those tunnels, she said, my body told me to stop. Every nerve, every muscle, every part of me was screaming that I had reached my limit. The index said I should have collapsed after 5 minutes. I kept going for over 30. She touched her injured leg. I did not do it because I was strong. I was not strong. I was weak and broken and terrified. I did it because there were 2 young people on my back who deserved to live. I did it because I could not bear the thought of their families getting a message that said I had given up. She looked around the chamber. Humans do not exceed their limits for themselves. They exceed their limits for each other. Captain Dohyun spoke next. His voice was rough, like gravel. The collective calculated that our station would surrender after 17 days. They were right. If we had been fighting for territory, for resources, for pride, we would have surrendered. But we were not fighting for any of those things. He touched the scar on his chest. I kept fighting with a wound that should have killed me because my daughter was on Earth, waiting for me to come home. Every second I stayed alive was another second she had a father. He looked at the alien faces around him. You can measure how much blood a human can lose before dying, but you cannot measure how much blood a father will lose before giving up on seeing his child again. Those are 2 very different numbers. Minji raised her hand, the one with missing fingers. The collective thought they knew our breaking point, she said. They thought they could calculate exactly how much pressure we would need before we cracked. And maybe they could if we were alone. But we were never alone. Every time I wanted to stop, I looked at the people beside me, and I found another reason to keep going. Every time I reached my limit, someone reached out and helped me take one more step. She lowered her hand. That is what humans do. We carry each other. We push each other. We refuse to let each other fall. And when you have 10,000 people doing that, all at once, limits stop meaning anything. The chamber was completely silent. Thousands of alien eyes stared at the human delegation. Finally, Una spoke again. You wanted us to be cataloged, predictable, limited. But here is the truth you need to understand. Humans will die for each other. We will suffer beyond reason. We will endure beyond possibility. And we will keep going long after your data says we should have stopped. She looked across the assembled species, her gaze steady and sure. The Helix Collective studied our limits. They built their entire strategy around what we could not do. They thought they knew exactly what we were capable of. She paused. They were wrong, because limits are not walls to humans. They are starting points. The creature of blue fire spoke again, more quietly now. What would you have us learn from this? Yuna thought about her answer for a long moment. I would have you learn that you are more than you think you are. Every one of you. Every species in this chamber. The index has told you what your limits are. It has told you what you cannot do, what you cannot survive, what you cannot overcome. And you have believed it. She shook her head. Stop believing it. Start believing in each other instead. 6 months later, the Helix Collective formally dissolved the index. In its place, they created something new. They called it the Record of Determination, and it cataloged not what species could do, but what they would do when pushed to their absolute edge. Humanity's entry was simple and short. Unknown. Recommend caution. But alongside that entry, there was a new phrase that began appearing in the records of other species. Species who had watched the human war. Species who had heard the stories. Species who had started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, they were capable of more than they had been told. The phrase was simple. Limits unknown. It spread through the galaxy like a sunrise, touching species that had spent thousands of years being told they were weak, being told they could be predicted, being told they could be controlled. Now they knew the truth. Now they knew that limits were just another obstacle to be overcome. And somewhere on a small blue planet called Earth, humans continued to do what they had always done. They loved each other. They fought for each other. They carried each other through the darkness. They broke limits that the universe said could not be broken. Not because they were special, not because they were chosen, but because they simply refused to accept that anything was impossible. And in that refusal, they changed the galaxy forever. One broken limit at a time,